Hello, limited viewers of my content. It's the Elite Gur here, and today I'm going to draw comparisons between two pieces of interesting video game content. Namely, Bioshock 2's criminally underappreciated Minerva's Den DLC, and the somewhat recent first installment of Burial at Sea, an episodic expansion on 2013's Bioshock Infinite. These expansions are projects that both arrived under similar conditions, so it is natural to compare them, but there are many striking similarities, so let us begin. Let me preface the following by giving my opinions on the base games of these two expansions. Bioshock 2, while it was a cash-in on the success of Bioshock 1, had a lot of effort put into it, and at least attempted to go somewhere with the formula. But the writing just didn't have the same talent or novelty behind it. So it ended up being a good game that just lacked the spark that made the first one so grandiose and alive. Bioshock Infinite, on the other hand, worked so hard to go way out on a limb with the story and setting that the mechanics suffered greatly, and the story ended up wobbling a bit as well. So I think that Bioshock 2 and Bioshock Infinite were a slightly boring success and an extremely intriguing failure, respectively. Now on to the analysis of our two subjects. Both of these expansions arrived in a climate of trying to retroactively cover the failing of their parent games, and both do their best. Minerva's Den providing a much more cohesive and better written experience, and Burial at Sea actually having combat mechanics that aren't full of shit. What I really think, though, is that Burial at Sea was just an attempt to recapture Minerva's Den. It really stuck out. It takes place in a closed-off consumer electronics section of Rapture? Check. The new gameplay edition being a continuous fire laser? Check. More heavily diving into the 60s Art Deco consumerism theme? Check. And, spoiler alert, a striking character crisis at the end? Check. Now this isn't a bad thing for Burial at Sea, because most of those things are just kind of a checklist for making a good Shock game, and you could say it was an attempt to use Bioshock Infinite as a net to catch the butterfly, which is perfection in the Shock series, which Minerva's Den got pretty close to. But it is kind of disappointing, especially for something they were hailing as kind of new. So perhaps it was because they thought Minerva's Den was so tainted with original sin that nobody had played it or something. Enough rambling. Let's start picking these two subjects apart. The interesting thing that Burial at Sea apparently brought to the table was a depiction of pre-Civil War Rapture still somewhat functioning as a society. This was well realized, albeit slightly staged, but it was admittedly an old hat to me personally, because I read. I liked this little section of Burial at Sea, however. It had all the little references it needed and a creepy meeting with Sandra Cohen, and it was a step up from the sightseeing sections of Bioshock Infinite, which were much less alive and three-dimensional when you look at them. What I really appreciated about Burial at Sea, though, was that the mechanics really stepped up to bat. You can carry every weapon, but ammo is as limited as it was in System Shock 2. And this, combined with the addition of the skyhook to Rapture, really makes the combat dynamic at the least, despite having the sad absence of some more involved Shock series mechanics. All the mechanics and setting for the upcoming Part 2 of Burial at Sea seem really well set up, so I'm happy about that. The issue is the length. Part 1 was only 100 minutes or so long, at a similar price point to Minerva's Den, which was 3 hours long and had slightly more flexibility and replayability gifted to it by the Bioshock 2 plasmid and gene tonic systems. Given how much more time and energy could be getting put towards these episodes than was put towards Minerva's Den, this is almost unacceptable. The next issue is that the plot itself turns out to be just pointless. The short length kneecaps it, and it feels like 1.5 acts of story development rather than an entire arc of a proper Shock game. Minerva's Den, on the other hand, introduced multiple new characters and showed you an entire back element of Rapture which was previously unseen. Burial Part 1 ends with a cool plot twist. Not exactly the one you would expect, actually, but it's DC Comics shit. It's in a cul-de-sac alternate universe, which actually doesn't make sense within the contentions of Infinite, so it just kind of seems like it doesn't matter. Now, I don't want to spoil either one of these expansions, and I don't want to sound like a hater of Bioshock Infinite, but let's just say that the story and the twist of Minerva's Den is a lot more impactful and interesting than that of Burial at Sea, Part 1, that is. Overall, Burial at Sea Part 1 is a step in the right direction for Bioshock Infinite, but when Bioshock 2 was almost as flawed, and went way further with way fewer resources to bear on Minerva's Den, it's quite a bit of a disappointment, just like Infinite itself. Perhaps they are hoping to innovate, read catch up to Valve, by doing a teaser of a first act of a set of expansions and then really putting some meat into the second act, and then never making a third act. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.